Audible is the best place to listen for everyone. For sci-fi people, people who love a good scare,
Small one.
thriller
Okay.
people, and people who just want to be captivated with true crime.
Seemed like a rather two-dimensional villain with his only reason for being so evil, the fact that he got rejected. But after checking out interviews with the actor who portrayed Gaston in the live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast, and reading more into the creation of the character, it's clear to see why Gaston's mental state seems so fragile. And it turns out that it likely has something to do with the villain's history as a war hero and the mental scars that came with going to war. If there was one thing that was clear about Belle and Gaston's village, it's that the latter was seen as a godlike figure, which was likely because of his status as a war hero and savior of the village. Though his story in the military wasn't mentioned much in the original animated Beauty and the Beast, the actor behind the live-action portrayal of Gaston managed to add more layers to the character that have seemingly become canon. And while there was little mention of it in either of the movies, it's been revealed that Gaston is beloved by everyone simply because he was responsible for saving their small town from invaders when he was still a young man. According to the actor that played Gaston in Disney's live-action remake, Luke Evans, Gaston saved his town when he was only 16 years old. This all came out during an interview with EW, and Evans was quoted as saying, "The fact of the story is that Gaston is a war hero and an army captain, and the only reason he's got this celebrity status is that when he was 16, he protected the town from a pack of Portuguese marauders in 1740. Now, even though he was a young man who lived in a small town, it's likely that Gaston's success when fending off the marauders led him to gain a great reputation, and while that might have seemed like a good thing, in Gaston's case, it looks like it led him to experiencing some very traumatic events that affect him for the rest of his life." Evans also pointed out that his portrayal of Gaston was originally going to be much darker than what audience members got to see in the final cut of the film. It likely would have depicted more of the character's war-torn side and may have even included some detailed film conversation between Gaston and LeFou. The main reason for that speculation is because Gaston's actor also mentioned the fact that LeFou went to war with Gaston, and that's actually why Gaston's sidekick was so obsessed with him in the first place. Not only did he experience the same amount of heroism that the rest of the village did during the 1940 invasion that Gaston saved them from, but according to Evans, the two characters served together, and LeFou saw firsthand the heroic feats that Gaston displayed during the troubled times. This also meant that Gaston had someone who could back up all of his war stories that his ego likely forced him to share with anyone who cared to listen. It's clear that Luke Evans was able to make the character of Gaston into his own work of art, and with the help of the director, Bill Condon, the two have managed to add a nice heroic detail to the villain's story. However, that same heroic detail could have also been the cause of not only Gaston's narcissism, but also his resorting to evil tactics when he didn't get his way. Now, Gaston, like most veterans who faced active duty, likely felt the emotional pain left behind by all of the bloodshed that surrounded him during his time in the military, which was something that he would have either learned to deal with or have been consumed by. According to Luke Evans, whether you believe it or not, Gaston was a normal human being, which means he was definitely suffering from PTSD. In a quote from his interview with EW when speaking about the character, Evans said he probably does suffer from PTSD, which he manages to keep under wraps because he has people like the villagers and LeFou and the girls who can puff him up and make him feel sexy and wanted. While that might sound ridiculous, it's actually a really plausible way for Gaston to have dealt with his PTSD. Statistically, one of the most common ways for someone who has something traumatic happen in their lives to cope with any lingering effects or stressors is through the use of distractions, whether it be healthy or not. So Gaston being swooned over and beloved by the village would have definitely helped him cope with what he went through during war times, no matter what sort of mental scar it left behind. Another technique that Gaston would have used to keep his PTSD at bay would have been for him to apply what he learned in the military to his daily life. And there's a good chance that he did exactly that when he became a hunter for a living. In both the animated and the live-action versions of the movie, Gaston was depicted as a hunter. And while out hunting, Gaston would have applied many of the tactics that he learned on his journey to becoming a war hero. And that's also probably why he was so successful. Though no matter how successful he was, he might have been only able to control his PTSD for so long before the trauma left behind from his time in the army began to rip him to pieces. Now, if you aren't sure whether or not Gaston's military tactics would apply to his career, there is even a line in his iconic song during the live-action film that wasn't in the original animated version that could hint at how he applied his time in the war to his hunting. In the song Gaston, when he was singing about hunting, there was the line, "I carefully aim for the liver and I shoot from behind," to which LeFou responded by asking if that's fair, but Gaston didn't care. Well, there's a good chance that part of Gaston's experiences during the war included him and his squad sneaking around to kill the enemy soldiers in order to gain the upper hand. It's a common tactic that's been used in military forces all throughout history, and Gaston likely would have learned it firsthand, plus the fact that the line wasn't in the original song, but ended up in the live-action version where the actor had explicitly told fans that the character was a former war hero, could mean that this added line did come from that darker side of Gaston. Either way, it's clear that the village's hero was carrying extra weight on his shoulders that the audience didn't know about, and it was likely caused by his traumatic experiences in the military. And one last thing that probably helped Gaston outwit his PTSD, at least for a little while, was the fact that everyone around him, aside from Belle, treated him like a war hero, because, as his story goes, he was one. There's even a mural that the villagers painted of him in the tavern, and if that doesn't show you how much love they had for him, I don't know what does. And love for those around is one of the true things that can help someone who is suffering from any sort of PTSD. Now, that's not to say that it's the cure, but, as they say, unconditional love helps at least mend all mental wounds. But even that being said, though their love was unconditional, the villagers didn't provide any actual support for Gaston, and it was only a matter of time before whatever mental scar was left behind from the war was ripped open. All it took was a single rejection, and Gaston lost his mind to the point where he was ready to murder a beast that he didn't even believe existed. Up until 2 seconds before he saw red. During that same interview with EW, while Evans described his character's personality, he mentioned that deep down Gaston, quote, is a broken human being. He's jaded, and the second he realizes that he's not going to get what he wants, the military creature comes out in him. This shows exactly why Gaston went from Belle, marry me, the beast is a real, to let's all sing a song as we go on a monster hunt. It was his military instincts kicking in. There's even a chance that whatever war trauma Gaston had been dealing with kicked in and sent him into a PTSD-induced episode, which could have been an indicator of just how deep his mental scarring goes. Now, Gaston had kept a level for a while, but that could be because everyone in the village treated him like a saint and refused to tell him no. That was also until he decided to ask out Belle, the one woman in the village that could resist his charm. And resist it she did. Belle turned Gaston down in the beginning and toward the end of Beauty and the Beast, and on neither occasion did Gaston take the rejection well. In the first instance, Belle's rejection sent him into a strange, depressive state in which he was sulking in the tavern, but everyone around him began to praise Gaston again, and this time in the form of a song, which returned the hunter's spirits and made him believe that he could get Belle to marry him if he just kept trying. However, had he simply stopped there and looked for someone who actually loved him, Gaston might not have turned back into the military creature like Luke Evans described him as. In the movie, Gaston then resorted to using Belle's father to help him swoon her, but no matter which version of the movie he watched, it was messed up. Gaston had Maurice sent to a mental hospital in the animated movie, and in the live-action version, he literally left Maurice to the wolves on the way to the castle. And then, when Belle officially rejected him again, Gaston thought it was only because she loved the beast, which ended up shattering his fragile, war-torn ego. The hunter then decided to play out the classic tantrum of, if I can't have her, then no one can, and decided to mount an expedition to raid the beast's castle and kill him. In the end, the military creature that lived inside Gaston came out and ultimately resulted in his own death. What do you think about Gaston's history as a war hero? Does it add any excuse for his otherwise reprehensible behavior toward Belle and the beast? Make sure you let us know in the comments below.
First up, in the ongoing feud between Selena Gomez and Hailey Bieber, fans have made it abundantly clear who they support. And surprise, surprise, it's not Justin Bieber's wife Hailey. She's been exposed for being a mean girl, a bully, and something that's even worse these days, a nepo baby. But now she's just been exposed for something else. Fans have found evidence that makes it seem as though she might also be racist. People have been doing a deep dive into her old Twitter and Tumblr posts with hopes of finding something shocking, and they definitely found what they were looking for. They posted screenshots of tweets and Tumblr posts dating back years that showed examples of Hailey using the N-word casually, claiming that she came back from Florida a different race, and using language associated with racism against the Asian community. In a tweet from January 2012, she wrote, "Shut up before I smack you back to your own country." And then in November of 2013, she wrote, "To those foreigners who don't celebrate Thanksgiving, so sorry your country didn't have pilgrims and Indians to start such a sick holiday." Yeah, that's pretty indefensible. Shortly after, most tweets mentioning her past were deleted, and Haley decided to close her Twitter account altogether. Celebrities often forget that you can find literally everything on the internet these days, and obviously her past eventually came back to bite her. In fact, fans have discovered a whole lot more since then, and most of it is pretty embarrassing. Recently, there's been evidence posted that proves that she was a hardcore Justin Bieber fan for years before they got together. In fact, she would often tweet about his relationship with Selena and how much he shipped them as a couple. In a deleted tweet from 2012, she wrote, "I don't care what anyone says, but Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez together is the definition of a teenage dream." Soon after that, a video resurfaced online from 2012 that shows Haley lurking in the background while Justin met with fans. She was in the crowd trying to get close to him as if she was just another fan waiting her turn. This is pretty strange considering that they were first introduced in 2009, so at the time of the video they would have met before. These days the couple's every move has been watched more than ever, and so many people are convinced that they have a toxic relationship. In 2020, Justin got a ton of flack from fans in a paparazzi video that went viral. In that shocking clip, the singer pulls up in a black chauffeured SUV. As he got out of the car, he looked visually annoyed as if he's just had some kind of meltdown. Without looking back, he carelessly slams the door in Haley's face. Then in 2021, fans were shocked when a video went viral of Haley making Justin physically uncomfortable. The two of them were doing a live stream of some kind when an awkward moment broke out. In the video, Justin could be seen sitting down casually while Haley was standing behind him with her arms crossed. She then tries to be affectionate and puts her arms around him, which makes him visibly annoyed. He says, "Babe, I can't. Don't touch me right now. I just need some space." To be fair, he is trying to be nice about it and communicate with her honestly, but in terms of his body language, you can tell that he's not loving the way he's being touched. Now, obviously every relationship is different and every couple has different boundaries with each other, but a lot of people felt that Haley was straight up disrespecting his. Either way, these little moments of tension don't necessarily mean that the couple are having issues, because we still have no idea what goes on behind closed doors. So for now, it's all just speculation. Moving on, Cara Delevingne is finally speaking out about her battle with substance use and sobriety. If you didn't know, last year was a crazy time for her. She checked herself into rehab after paparazzi photos of her at Van Nuys Airport went viral. These pictures were extremely concerning when they started circulating around social media. Cara looked very disheveled, and there was a video taken of her behaving erratically while pacing around the car park. She was seen dropping her phone several times, shaking, and generally unable to stand still. Now, Cara says those photos became a source of overwhelming shame and the wake-up call that she desperately needed. In a new interview for the April cover of Vogue, the model opened up about that chaotic incident. Apparently, she had just come back from Burning Man after a summer of intense partying for days on end. She said, "It's heartbreaking because I thought I was having fun, but at some point it was like, okay, I don't look well. You know, sometimes you just need a reality check." So in a way, those pictures were something to be grateful for. At that time, Cara was at the end of her rope. Soon after lockdown started in 2020, she and her girlfriend Ashley Benson broke up.
Get an education that fits your life and your budget with the most affordable college tuition in the state. NAU Online. Achieve your aspirations at the speed of you. Start your journey at nau.edu/online. Depression. Guess what? I'm going to therapy.
Okay.
And without any acting work, she started to feel incredibly isolated. Quote, "I just had a complete existential crisis. All of my sense of belonging, all my validation, my identity, everything was so wrapped up in work. And when that was gone, I felt like I had no purpose. Instead of taking the time to really learn something new or do something new, I got very wrapped up in misery, wallowing, and partying." But even after lockdown ended, she continued to party heavily because she wanted to escape that and change her reality. But things reached a head in the spring of 2022 when her
You okay? Okay. I'm not walking today. I'm not going to donate some blood.